Violence. It's a word we see everywhere, in the news and history books, and we all have these really strong gut feelings about it. But what if we could just set aside the judgment for a second and look at it like a science? Well, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to pull back the curtain and look at the frameworks that experts use to understand what's really going on behind the headlines.
So where do you even start? Well, experts begin with a super precise definition. It's an intentional act that is likely to cause injury. Those two words, intentional and likely, they're key. Seems pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, not so fast. Because as soon as you ask that question, is all violence seen as equal? Society's answer is a loud and clear nope. And that gets us to our first big idea. When we ask what is violence, it turns out society's view is, well, all over the place. It's really, really inconsistent.
I mean, just think about it for a second. We say killing is wrong, but then nations go to war. We believe life is precious, but there are passionate arguments for euthanasia. And in our own justice system, things like poverty or a history of abuse can actually change how we view a violent act, sometimes even excusing it. So our rules aren't set in stone. They bend and they flex depending on the situation.
Okay, so if society's moral compass is constantly spinning, how can anyone possibly get a clear reading on someone's risk for future violence? You can't. You need something more stable, something scientific.
And this is it. This is what the pros use. In clinical and forensic settings, they don't just go with public opinion. They use structured, analytical tools. And one of the most powerful is the biopsychosocial framework.
The best way to think about this model is like you're building a complete 3D picture of a person. Instead of looking for one single reason, it pulls together risk factors from 3 totally different but connected parts of a person's life. It's about getting a whole, holistic view. All right, so let's crack this model open and take a look at the 3 pillars that hold up a real professional risk assessment.
It all comes down to 3 things: the individual or psychological component, the social and environmental one, and the biological one. You have to look at all 3 together to get the full picture. So let's break each one down.
Okay, first up, the psychological. This is all about the person's internal world. What's going on inside. A history of violence is, no surprise, a huge red flag. Same with things like being highly impulsive, having violent fantasies, or dealing with certain personality disorders.
Next, we've got the social piece. These are the outside forces, the environment. We're talking about things like a history of abuse as a kid, not having a solid support system, facing serious economic stress. All these external pressures can seriously dial up the risk.
And third, there's the biological component. This gets into the physical and physiological factors. Stuff like a traumatic brain injury, neurological problems, or the active symptoms of a severe mental disorder, like delusions, where you believe things that just aren't real.
But here's something that's absolutely crucial to understand, because it pushes back against a huge public misconception. There's this idea that severe mental illness automatically means violent. But the research is crystal clear. That's just not true. The data shows that many people with serious mental disorders are no more violent than anyone else.
Okay, so that framework helps us understand the person. But what about the act itself? Well, experts categorize the violence too. And this brings us to 2 very different types, what we call reactive aggression versus predatory aggression.
And this is a fundamental split. On one side, you have reactive violence. Think of it like a hot-blooded explosion. It's defensive, it's emotional, it's a response to feeling threatened. But on the other side, you have predatory violence. This is cold-blooded. It's planned, it's calm, and it's used as a tool to get something else.
So let's zoom in a little closer on this idea of hot rage versus a cold plan. What really separates them? This chart lays it all out perfectly. Just look at the differences. Under emotion, reactive violence is all about intense fear or anger. Predatory? There's really no conscious emotion at all. It's cold. What about arousal, like your heart rate? Through the roof in a reactive state, but calm and minimal in a predatory one. And the goal is totally different. One is about stopping a threat. The other is about getting a prize, whether it's money or power or something else.
Now, it's really important to remember that real life is messy. These aren't always 2 separate perfect boxes. You can have an event that starts out as a cold plan, but then something goes wrong and it explodes into hot rage. It's really more of a spectrum.
So why does this all matter so much? Why draw this line? Well, here's the absolute key takeaway. The more planned, the more instrumental an act of violence is, the higher the risk for future violence. An emotional outburst is one thing, but a cold, calculated plan, that suggests a much more dangerous path.
And that really leaves us with one last thing to think about. Once you can tell the difference between a crime of passion and a crime of purpose, between a hot-blooded reaction and a cold-blooded plan, how does that change how you see the person who did it? Does it change your view at all?